Hello YouTube, it's me again, and we're gonna try something a little different. Hopefully this whole setup works. But we're gonna go through and watch lilsimsie's 20 useful tips, and I don't know, just my take on it. I haven't watched this video before. I do like to build. I'm gonna see if I know these tips or if these tips are new. And we'll just go ahead and see what happens here.
Become free to play. And so with that, obviously a ton of new players are going to pick the game up for the very first time. And let's be real, building in The Sims is kind of hard, it's kind of confusing, and it can be really daunting when you haven't done much of it before. And so today I'm going to walk you through 20 tips that I have found extremely useful when it comes to building in The Sims. These are things that I get questions about all the time. Like I said, it's just kind of confusing even if you've played the game before or have been for a while. So even if you're already a big Sims fan, you might not know about a lot of these. The first one is to hold control and
Okay, so yes, building is confusing. There's a lot of little things you can do. There's a lot of little cheats, especially like with roofing. Roofing is its own thing. So yes, I completely agree that it's very confusing and that there's a lot of things that if you've never built before, things that you might not know. And there's even a few of these I might not know. Hold control and redraw a wall to delete it. Oh yeah, this one's pretty straightforward and standard.
Redraw a wall to delete it. So instead of going through and like individually deleting a wall or trying to delete it like this, instead you can get the wall tool, hold control, and then draw over it again, and that'll delete the wall. This is super useful for trying to delete walls quickly. It even works on fences. You can hold control and delete the fence. You can do it with the room tool even. You can hold control and delete part of the room. Even on pools, you can hold control and redraw to delete part of that pool. It's pretty useful because you can get to like random parts that you might have missed otherwise. You can even do it with like diagonals.
Hold up, I'm in a weird spot here. Okay. But yes, this is a very, very basic, if you only learn one of these tips, do this one, because I use this one a lot. I very rarely use the demolish tool, that little hammer up there for when I'm deleting things. I only really use it for like the tiles. But yes, like she says, it's very handy, very useful. If you learn nothing from this video with her, learn that, because that is very handy and I use it all the time.
If you want. This one in particular, I get asked about so often. My Twitch chat will be like, wait, what did you just do? How did you do that? So remember, you can hold control and redraw things to delete them. This next one might be a bit more common, but it is the move objects cheat.
Yep.
If you type bb.moveobjects on, you can freely place items. So in your game, you can open up the cheats panel by holding Control Shift C all at once. And that's gonna open up this little text box in the top left corner. And
okay, this is another, like she said, really common one. And there's reasons you might not use it, because you can place things in places where your Sims can't. Well, it basically makes the object unusable. So this one's one to be careful with, but if you can't understand why things aren't moving in the places they should be at, this can help. But yeah. All I'm gonna say is be careful with this one, because like it can make some of your objects unusable if you're not careful. Like things can end up in walls, intersecting other objects. Just be careful with this one.
in there, you can type bb.moveobjects space on. And then you press enter and that turns on the move objects cheat. With that, you can completely freely place objects. So I could like put these two beds on top of each other. I could put the dresser in the bed. You can place anything anywhere essentially. Now, obviously you probably don't want to do that. It's more useful for things like scooting the nightstands closer to the bed. Maybe you want to stick a plant in this corner because it wouldn't fit otherwise. It's possible you could run into some issues with this by like making things unplayable. For example, if you put like a table in the bed, your sim probably can't get into the bed. But if you stick it at like the end of the bed, you probably won't.
I'm glad she pointed that out, because yeah, you can make objects unusable if you're not careful. But yeah, if you want things in certain places, it's really helpful for that.
have any issues. A good rule of thumb is that if it looks like it won't function, it probably won't function, but you can always play test it. Again, it's more useful for like decorating and placing things where you want for them to be a little bit cuter. Kind of in a similar vein, you can hold Alt to freely place objects. So I mentioned wanting to like scoot the nightstand a little bit closer or scoot the plant in the corner. By default, where it places on the grid isn't super good, but if you hold Alt, you can free place it and like scoot it and put it wherever you want. When holding Alt, you can also freely rotate objects. So instead of it just rotating like on these slots, you can hold Alt and put it however you'd like. Weirdly, that Alt rotating doesn't always work. You might have to switch your game's camera settings. So the next tip is to use the Sims 3 camera.
Alt placing is another thing that's not terribly uncommon. And yes, I do sometimes use it to slot things where I think they should. There's a shelf in Eco Lifestyle that sits away from the wall, and I always think it should be right up next to the wall, so I always alt place that one. Again, it's a decorative thing, so even if it's up against the wall, you can still put stuff on the shelves, and the Sims can still view it. I know, like, James Turner and lilsimsie like to alt place, like, when they're making tiny house builds, they kind of slot things a little bit into the wall so they take up less room. One thing I don't use with Alt is I don't use the freely rotate thing. So that's something that I won't say I didn't know about it, but it's not something I use. So maybe it's something I need to play with a little more. Nope. Sorry, I fiddled. Okay.
Use the Sims 3 camera. In-game, there's a Sims 4 camera and a Sims 3 camera, and they change the controls, which can be kind of confusing. I personally always use the Sims 3 camera instead of the Sims 4 one. I just find it's better because I can get better angles, I can rotate around more. To switch the camera settings, do you see this little camera icon in the top right corner? There's a few things. You can like zoom out, you can use it to rotate, but you can also change between the Sims 4 and Sims 3 cameras this way, and also put it into a top-down view, which can be kind of useful. The Sims 4 camera is completely different. You can't really get those same angles that you can with the Sims 3 camera. Frankly, I find the Sims 4 camera like really...
Do you love Gantt charts? Here's how easily you can build one in ClickUp.
like really difficult to use. It's just really unfamiliar to me, but I understand that most of you probably have the opposite because it's the default. I just think the Sims 3 camera is way better and you can do way more with it. At least you can really easily swap between them. So if you're having issues with like wanting to freely rotate things, or you want to get a better angle like this, like inside the build to see it, use the Sims 3 camera. Talking about some more detail work and like freely placing objects, you can actually raise items up.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure which camera I use, but I do definitely prefer one over the other. But again, I would highly recommend playing with the other camera options. And I think that's something I'm going to mess with a little bit myself next time I build, just to see if there is a difference or if there's something I like versus something I don't like. Now this next one was something I learned a little bit later. It's like more of an advanced thing, because some objects don't slot to like certain places, and you know, like most places, there's some objects that only slot to the floor when you'd rather have them slot to like an accent table or a hallway table, and I believe she's going to get into this.
Up and down as much as you'd like. If you use the 0 and 9 keys, you can raise and lower objects in game. So for example, maybe you wanted to decorate some shelves above your kitchen counters, and say you wanted to place this tabletop potted plant there, but obviously it's not slotting, like I can't get it to go up onto the shelves. Shelves in this game can be kind of weird because some things slot and some things don't, but if you're having those problems, you can always like force it to go up there by using this raising and lowering objects. So I currently have that move objects cheat on, remember, and now I'm gonna press 9, and each time I press it, it raises the object up a tiny bit more. And so I can just raise this plant up to the perfect height and then try and alt place it and sit it there on the shelf. Then I can put some books next to it. These candles won't place either, so maybe I'll try and raise those up and place them myself too. And this way you can pretty much custom place objects to be wherever you want them to be. This is really, really useful for like clutter and decoration.
So now that she's mentioning this, I'm wondering if she's going to get to that other little cheat that she uses a lot, which is slotting things to counters, where you can see where she slots it and then pulls the counter out and puts the thing, the item, the decorative item she's trying to place on top of the counter. She'll put it where she wants and then slot the counter back. So I'm wondering if she's going to include how she include that one in this video now too, now that she's done the 9 and the 0 thing.
You might run into an issue though where you press the 9 key and all of a sudden the camera does this, like it jumps around. That's because you can set camera positions by holding control and a number in game. It's pretty useful for like cinematic stuff and like taking screenshots and filming videos, but the average player probably doesn't need it. In fact, you're probably just getting confused as to why your camera keeps jumping. So if that keeps happening, if you press 9 and it moves the camera and it's really annoying, just hold control while you do it and it'll be fine. You're also setting a new camera position, but that's okay. I also do it by accident all the time, so don't worry about it. And while we're talking about raising and lowering objects and getting them to fit to the right spots, I want to tell you another way to fix objects that are slotted.
Okay. So again with camera settings, that seems to be like a whole nother video topic in itself. Like the Sims 3 camera versus the Sims 4 camera versus camera settings. Versus top-down, which is what I like to build in a lot because then I can see my floor plan. That seems almost like a complete... Hello. A complete another video in and of itself. But I'm thinking she's getting into that cabinet slotting thing that I was talking about, so let's watch that.
To the wrong place. So say you want to put the paper towels next to the sink, but it keeps slotting, it's really annoying, it won't place where you want them to place. When you try and do the raise objects up trick, it just keeps slotting to the wrong spots. There is a way to fix this. It's a little bit weird, but hear me out. When you have move objects on, if you move the object off the counter, it stays at the exact right height. To give you a bit of a comparison, sometimes if you try and raise and lower the item to the exact height, it might be floating a little bit, like you might have an issue with it floating a little bit above where the slot actually is. But if you just put it there and then move it off, it stays at the exact height. So to put these paper towels next to the sink where I want them, just a little bit closer, I'm gonna move both of these counters just away from the wall. And then I'm gonna move the paper towel off the counter, hold Alt, and then kind of like guess where I think I want it. And then when I put the counters back, you can see that it looks like it's in the perfect position. You might have to like move it back and do a little bit of adjusting. It's weird because you gotta move the counter out of the way so it doesn't slot to anything. But with this, you can pretty much sneak around and place any item wherever you want it to be. Some things are a bit easier than others. Like I always have a hard time placing soap for some reason. I think it's because it's so small. But when I do the same trick with the soap and I try and put it next to the sink, it takes me like 3 tries to get it in the right spot. I have to keep like moving it and then putting it back and trying to make it work. But this is super useful for trying to clutter up your kitchen counters or your coffee table or like your nightstands and stuff. I can do this same thing over here and like try and mess around with the nightstand to get it to look more full. Again, it can be kind of weird because you have to like try and figure out where it needs to be placed. Like this is obviously wrong, so now I gotta scoot it all back a little bit further and maybe over to the right and then put the nightstand back. So it, again, kind of annoying, but it does look cute when it's all done. Another super useful tip is to change the size of objects. You can scale them up and down by...
Okay, so I'm glad she went over that slotting thing and told you exactly how it works with the BB move objects and whatever. Because that was one that I've been wondering about, because she uses that a lot. Another really common thing is to size up and size down things, especially rugs. The only thing with this, and I hope she talks about it, is that even if you size something up or down, the game still recognizes it as its original size. So if you size something way up and you try to move it, you can't grab the outside edges of it. You have to grab it from like the middle where the original object is. And yeah, it's kind of weird that way, but it can make things look nicer, fit better, and you can, like I said, I use this a lot with rugs, because some things don't scale up and down. And I hope she's been really good about telling you what things won't. And windows and mirrors definitely do not scale up and down because the lighting gets screwy. So let's hear about this one.
Using the left and right bracket keys. So for example, I can use the right bracket key to make this a giant rubber duck, or I could use the left bracket key to make this rug a tiny bit smaller. I wouldn't do this with like functional objects, think like the fridge, the toilet, the bed, stuff like that, just in case it breaks anything, but it is really useful for decor. Like I mentioned, I probably do it the most for rugs. Sizing them down sometimes just a tiny bit makes it fit a little bit better. Or maybe you want to have a bigger rug, so you size it up one. Sometimes the scale's a little bit weird, like sometimes I wish there was a bit of an in-between of these two sizes, but when you play around with it, you can find a lot of objects that change size really well. I probably use it the most for rugs and landscaping. I find it really useful to like maybe have a slightly smaller version of the plant and then kind of alt rotate them so it looks like they aren't all.
I forgot about the plants, but yeah, I do this a lot with my landscaping. And Vixella does it a lot with her landscaping too. There's that one, the pale yellow, low-lying yellow flowers she scales up and uses it as a cheaty landscape thing. But yeah, rugs I do it a lot with. If you watch Gray Still Plays his Sims, he has messed around a little bit with the scale of things. And he has scaled beds down and they still kind of work. What was the other thing? Yeah, I don't know. He scaled beds down and they still worked. But that he recorded those videos a few years ago, so maybe it still doesn't work. All I'm going to say is if you mess around with it, like I'm going to agree with lilsimsie, if you mess around with it, especially with like functional objects instead of like decorative ones, that things might not work anymore.
All the exact same, because obviously all of this landscape.
And another video.
Take this. Find them.
Gotta love the
Landscaping is
ads.
basically just like plastic plants, right? And so when you like make one a little bit smaller and then rotate the one next to it, you can maybe pretend that they're all a little bit different. It's also super useful for like artwork on the walls. Maybe you want to have this cheap painting be a little bit bigger. Or maybe this painting is like slightly too big, so you want it to fit a little bit better on the wall. You can like really customize your decor this way. Another way to like really customize placement is to use quarter tiles. So kind of similar to alt placing, you can actually place items on quarter tiles.
Quarter tiles was another like intermediate thing I learned, and it's basically you can make like diagonals with your flooring. I think you can also, yeah, and she's going to talk about placing items, but I use this more for like placing flooring.
Instead of the default half tile by pressing F5. When you hit that F5 key, it turns on quarter tile placement. So as you've probably noticed, by default, everything slots in half tile increments. When you hit F5, it switches it to quarter tiles, so it moves in like way smaller increments. I find this really useful for like maybe decorating a slightly smaller living room because I can scoot the rug closer to the wall. And then I can slot the couches like a little bit closer too. You can just get a slightly finer placement without having to worry about alt placing it into the right spot. This is, I think, most useful for windows because sometimes you want it to be like a little bit further over, but by default it doesn't really do that. And then to alt place it is kind of annoying because you got to get it to the right height and stuff. But when I hit F5, you can see I can get a slightly finer placement. I can also raise it up like a tiny bit more without having to worry about like trying to raise it up using alt and then having it be a little bit off. So you might not use this every day, but in certain situations it's really useful. And then you can just hit F5 again to turn it off and it goes back to normal. Another tip that I get asked about all the time is how to rotate flooring, and you can do that using the angled bracket keys.
I'm kind of upset she didn't use the F-tile quarter placement thing for like placing flooring, but maybe she's getting to that later. But yes, I do love the angled bracket thing to switch the flooring, and that's something that I also learned a little bit later. It's very detailed, and it's mostly like which direction the wood grain is flowing. And sometimes there's like a pattern you want to go a certain direction, but most of the time it's not really noticeable, especially like with the it's like the plain pattern stuff. You can't really tell which direction it's going, or some of the tile work. Doesn't really make a difference. Like I said, it's more like the wood grains and some of like the really patterned stuff.
Maybe you want to change the direction of the wood, so when you hit the angled bracket key, you can just swap it around. This is even good for like trying to place concrete paths, because maybe I want it to line up with this front door, but obviously it looks kind of weird like this. You can just use that angled bracket key to rotate the flooring until it lines up and looks a little bit better. I even like to do this on porches. While we're talking about flooring, you might have just seen me place it in the entire room. I did that by holding shift. You can hold shift to place flooring or wallpaper in an entire room, and you can hold alt to paint just one wall. So say I wanted to paint this entire...
Yeah, this one's also a fairly common one. It's one of the first ones you like learn. Yeah, you hold shift to cover the room. You hold... Actually, you don't need to hold alt to paint. Yeah, I don't think you need to hold a button just to paint one section of the wall. But maybe alt is just one entire wall length? Let's see what she says.
room yellow. Instead of like going around and painting each wall, I could just hold shift and then it paints the entire room. Or if I want to just have this entire wall be yellow, I can hold alt and it just paints the one wall. This can be a little bit weird when you're painting the exteriors of houses, because the game...
Okay, that's something new I learned. You can hold alt to just paint one wall. And that's something I probably will be using. So that's good.
Sees each of these 3 boxes as separate rooms. So if I wanted to paint the house, I have to do each room separately, but it is really useful for making it go by quicker. Something else that I get asked about a lot is how I have this infinity sign, like how I'm building with infinite money. That's because I'm building from Manage Worlds. So instead of using like a sim and living in their house, I'm just building on an empty lot from Manage Worlds. So on the main menu, I pop into a world and then I pick a random lot. And
this is obvious. This is something I do a lot. I build for Manage Worlds a lot. I actually don't build from a sim view very often. Only if I'm already playing with the sim and they've been living there, that's when I build from a sim's point of view. So the majority of my build videos are built from Manage World build. Although I have been looking into a series where like I renovate with $10,000 using a sim. But that's something I need to work at because, like I said, I'm not very good at building from a sim's point of view.
And when I click on it, there's like a little build icon, and then I go into build mode from there. That way there's no sim living here and I can just build whatever with infinite money. If you want more money, you can also just use money cheats. Ka-ching gives your sim 1,000 simoleons, Motherload gives your sims 50,000 simoleons, and money, space, whatever number you want gives your sims whatever amount of money you want. So those are also some pretty useful tips. But I think...
Okay, so... going off of like some of the Sims cheats, if you Google the Sims 4 cheats, you get an actual link to the official Sims 4 website, and they give you a list of very common cheats. So I'm actually going to put that link. I'm going to put, her video and everything in the description, so you can see like the link to the Sims 4 cheats and the link to her video, because obviously this video is about her video, and it would be improper of me to not include a link to it. And just as an FYI, I subscribe to lilsimsie. I love her videos. I've been continually watching her Nightmare Legacy challenge since its conception. So this is me appreciating what she's doing. This is not me trying to piggyback off of her content. I just wanted to showcase her and maybe learn some new building tips.
I think you might have heard of Motherload before,
yeah,
right? But now I want to get a little bit more advanced and talk about roofing. I've actually made entire videos on roofing tutorials and stuff, so if you need those, I can link them down below for you. But these are going to be some tips to like really customize your roofs. The first of them being that you can hold shift to edit just one side of the roof at a time. There are a lot of buttons on these roofs. You can raise them up and down, you can change the curve, you can extend the overhangs out in like pretty much any direction. But say, for example, you want to get rid of the overhang, but not on both sides. You just want this overhang on the right side to be gone. If you hold shift and then use the arrow, it'll remove it there, but it'll leave it on the left side where I wanted it to stay. That also works on like the front overhangs.
I'm still learning about roofing. I know there's a button combination to add more dots to the roof, but it makes sense that you hold shift and you can only do one side. It's just not something I mean, if I thought about it, I would know I could do it, but I haven't actually thought about it or used it, so that's something new I learned, that you can do that. But roofing in itself is an entire, like she said, it's it's an entire video, and she's got a series about it. So I'll put that down in the description for you as well. But let's see if she's got any more roofing tips.
And hold shift and then just edit this side, but not this one. So like on this house, maybe I want to have the overhang in the front. I want to see it over here, but I don't want it to clip into the back. I can hold shift and then I can get rid of it just on that side. And then I can try and make it fit the walls a little bit better. Now, as if this many roof options weren't already enough, there's actually a way to get some more. If you press shift and C, it gives you more options to adjust the curve of your roof. So if I wanted to have a kind of fancy curved roof, I can use these little circles to do it. But you can see it's kind of jagged. It looks kind of weird. If I press shift C, it's gonna like smooth the curve, which is really useful. But then it also gives me a couple more circles, so you can use that to get like a really fancy type of curve. There are a lot of options with this. It's kind of fun to experiment with. I don't really use all the fancy curves all that often, but it's definitely a nice tip to know, especially with the smoothing. And one final roof tip is that you
Yeah, so that was the one I knew about, was the shift C, and you can get more points to adjust the roofing. And I have used that a couple of times, like making gambrel houses or gambrel roofs, which are the really curved ones. So let's see what her last roofing tip is here.
You can actually use Alt on roofs as well to get a slightly finer placement.
Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you, so you can do not taxes.
It is tax season. It is tax season.
By default, when you try and adjust the height of a roof, it kind of slots to a bunch of different heights, but you can hold Alt and then just like freely place to whatever exact height you want. This is really useful for roofs like this, where by default, I might not be able to get it to line up perfectly. You can see there's a little bit of a gap there. I can just use Alt to place it a little bit better just so it lines up perfectly, and then it kind of melds better and looks a little bit nicer. There's also obviously a ton of like trim and freeze options in this game, and these can be kind of overwhelming. I find these freezes in particular to be extremely annoying just because of how they place. The game's auto placement is like really irritating sometimes. So a good tip for both freezes and roof trim is that you can place them on just one wall at a time by holding shift. So instead of it by default trying to place on an entire room, if I hold shift,
I don't use freezes very often. Sometimes I'll use like level trims, which are the next one down on the little thing there. But it's good to know that they work a lot like wallpaper. You can hold Alt just to do one side and not the other. Because I think I've built something on it to use like a freeze or a level trim. And it's placed in a weird way, which I didn't want it to place, but I didn't know how to fix it. So now I know how to fix it.
it goes on just one wall. And with that, I can get a little bit more control over where I'm trying to place it. It's still sort of attached to the room. Like when I try and place it on this wall, it places on this part of the room and then this part of this next room separately. But it does make it a lot easier to get it to look how you want when you do it like this. And that also works on just these trim pieces as well. Instead of it placing on the whole room, I can place it on just one wall. That can be really useful for trying to place it like maybe on the front of the roof. Because like, for example, sometimes it kind of clips and it places weird, but I only want it in the front. So you can do that by just holding shift and placing it literally only in the front. Now, speaking of clipping, I am sure we have all unfortunately experienced issues like this when we're trying to make stair landings. Sometimes you just want to have a nice open space around your stairs and the game decides to do this with the roofs. I want to show you how to fix that. So these are going to be some tips for fixing roof clipping. The main problem we're seeing right here is that these roofs are like overlapping and overhanging into the building. I can fix that by trying to line them up with the walls. So right now they're one tile over. I can try and scoot it one tile back, and then when it's lining up with the wall, it doesn't come through. I can do the same thing right here and try and line it up better there. It looks fine from the outside. It looks okay from the inside. We still have this little issue right here. You can fix that also by like scooting this over and lining it up with the wall. Obviously that ruins the outside. This does get a little bit complicated because you can fix that by like adding in extra roof pieces and trying to line those up perfectly with the wall as well to like make it flush with the wall. Again, I made an entire tutorial on roofing, so you can watch that separately. I think think a more reasonable solution for a lot of people is to mess with the walls, because the reason this is happening is because the game sees this whole thing as a room, and the game is confused about this part because the room is messed up with the fences. So if I were to put like a bedroom back here, that actually fixes the clipping because the game sees this as a real room. So oftentimes you won't really have that issue once you finish the floor plan, at least in some places. It's usually just in the stair landing where you have that problem. And again, the best way to fix that is to just adjust the roof so they line up perfectly with the walls. It might take you a bunch of roof pieces, like I was using 3 at one point, but you will get there. And while we're talking about stairs, I actually have a super useful money saving tip. If you're trying to build on a budget, you can delete the underside of the stairs and the fence behind the stairs to save money. So for example, on these porch stairs here, I'm placing my fence, I place the stairs, it's all decorative, but there's actually a fence behind these 2 stairs that I don't need because you can't even see it. That holding control tip comes in handy here because I can hold control and then redraw that fence. It's weird because I can't see it, but you can tell that I'm getting 56 simoleons back here. That's because I just deleted the fence that was behind those stairs. There's no point in it being there, you can't see it, and then you save a little bit of money. But more importantly, and a lot easier, you can just delete the underside of these stairs and that'll give you back like 150 simoleons. Some stairs are more expensive than others, but you'll always save money.
Okay, well, I guess I don't really get too detailed into budget stuff, but that does make sense because I have placed stairs and the fence disappears and I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's fine, it works. But I've never been able to figure out how she deleted the underside of the stairs. And so now that I've got like a zoomed in version of it, she just uses the demolition tool to get rid of it. Which I like for the outside stairs. The inside stairs, you can kind of go either way, take it or leave it. But yeah, I've always wanted to know how she did that, and that's how she does that.
On that, and you don't really need the underside of like the porch stairs. On the inside, it's a little bit tougher because I usually like how the wall looks there, but you can save like 600 simoleons by deleting that wall too. So that is really useful for budget houses because why spend 600 simoleons on like an empty wall when you could buy like a TV with that amount of money, you know? I'm kind of going all over the place right now, but another decorating tip involves custom cabinetry. You might not know this, but you can actually access a ton of custom cabinet pieces in the base game. All of the cabinets have a ton of different variants that you can use, and by default you might not even realize it because automatic counter placement is on, and the counter placement is pretty useful. It's nice how by default it gives you like the corner cabinets, but if you click on the cabinet you want to use and then you click that little gear icon, you can turn off.
Hey, so what if we have questions about our policy?
And what if it's late at night?
And what if someone still calls us?
Yeah, I gotta love insurance.
Off.
Okay, so I think I have this off by default, the automatic counter placement, because that way I can put things exactly where I want them. But if you have it on and you put things like she did, it will just carry on, you know, as you would. I think you can see my little mouse there. But the only thing is that I don't think it does like the end pieces, like the little end pieces that I sometimes want just to make things, just end things properly, which I have been using a little bit more here and there. Because I don't think it does that. I think it'll just place corner pieces as you move around. But yeah, I have mine off by default. It's on by default, but I have turned it off and never once looked back because I can do so much more.
Automatic counter placement, and it gives you a menu of all the different variants, and with that you can get like special end pieces. They've got like outside corners and inside corners. The upper cabinets have even more options. They have like a left end piece and a right end piece. They have like a mini, like shorter cabinet. They have a tall cabinet. They've got like an outside corner piece. So when you use these custom cabinets, you can get way more options and like a way more custom looking kitchen, and it's just that little gear icon. You would never know that hiding behind it is all of those options. A lot of people have never even seen these variants before, and every single cabinet in the game has all those options. Now, number 20, and my final tip for you, is also about accessing more objects. It's about the debug cheats. Now, these are like kind of advanced and maybe a little bit confusing, so not every player is going to want to do this. The first of them is bb.show hidden objects, and that opens up the debug menu. So when you
No, I wouldn't call the debug items advanced. It's just a way to get some. it opens up like all the collectibles and some of like the decorations from the world. Just like some of the landscaping that's out in the world that isn't usually available to place in your lot, and some of it's like free. But the only problem with like a lot of the debug items is your Sims don't treat them as actual items. They'll just kind of like ignore it and walk through it. So like the fences you get from there aren't really fences. Everything is mostly decorative. However, this is where like you access the My Sims trophies, all the frogs, the collectibles, like the fabricated items from Eco Lifestyle, some of the dumpster diving things from Eco Lifestyle, and anything like you would build with the woodworking table. Just like any of the craftables are in debug, and or any of the collectibles and stuff. But the collectibles will cost you money. The other like landscaping and decorative things more than likely will not. Some of them do, but most of them don't. And like I said, the decorative ones are purely decorative. Your Sims won't even acknowledge that they're there. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, like I said, I'll give you a list of the Sims 4 official cheats down below so that you have these available and not just in this video.
Type that cheat in, it gives you all of the debug options. You can search in build mode for debug and it all comes up at once. These are mostly things that you would never want or never use. This is all of the like gameplay items. So think like all of the drinks you can order at the bar and like all the frogs you can collect, scary doll heads and like random brooms and stuff. This is literally a baby that you can get in debug. Kind of scary, but sometimes this can be kind of useful for build mode. For example, there's this corkboard in game and there's actually a postcard collection. So if you search postcard and you have the debug cheat on, you can get all of those postcards and like decorate your Sims corkboard. Maybe you want to have like a frog or a crystal or anything. Like those collection things are sort of easy to get from debug. But there's also a second debug cheat that opens up even more scary items, and that is bb.show live edit objects. And with this live edit objects cheat, again, it opens up an even wider debug menu. When you search debug this time, you can access even landscaping options. This basically gives you access to all of the landscaping that's in the world. So they use like all of these trees and plants in the environment, but we don't necessarily have all the same options. There's some that we have in build mode, but they have like different sizes and different swatches and things like that. Well, you can access that in the live edit objects menu. The problem is it's not organized, it's not labeled, they're all just called debug. So when you scroll, like there's a lot of scrolling to do, and they aren't real objects either. Like there's this table, your Sims can't use it. It's like purely decorative. Some of them your Sims will walk straight through, but there's also a lot of cool stuff. Like there's interesting fence pieces that you can try and use. There's like base game plants that have extra swatches that we don't have in the real menu. There's even like giant shells of buildings and stuff. So there's a lot of weird stuff, but also a lot of useful items. So if you want to explore through, you might find some kind of cool things to use in your build. Just, enter at your own risk because it can be kind of overwhelming. I tend to use this in my like starter home type builds because all of this landscaping is free because it's not like real.
I'm also going to point out that if you have multiple packs, you can kind of sort through debug by just limiting the packs you want to scroll through. It decreases the amount of stuff you have to scroll through, but it still doesn't really organize it. I mean, it's all still just like crammed in there, like everything. You can't categorize it much more than what comes with different packs and whatnot. So it will help, but you're still going to do a lot of scrolling.
So it's great to have like beautiful plants outside of a really cheap Sims house, but don't feel like you have to go in and use that cheat. It definitely can be a bit scary. And that, my friends, is 20 tips for building in The Sims 4. I'm also gonna stick like a list of all of these tips in the description box, so if you want to more easily reference it or like screenshot it, feel free to do that. I know I talked for a super long time, but hopefully it was helpful. And I've got a bunch of other like actual tutorial videos on my channel where I like walk you through how to.
Okay, so overall, I really liked all the tips she included. I learned a couple of things, and she went over a lot of the basic things, like the things that are really common, like some of the cheat codes and the shift and alt placement and things of that nature. I also Love how she went through how she did her counter placement things, because I was wondering about that, how she deleted the underside of the stairs, because I never did figure that out. Mostly because I don't use the demolition tool very often, so maybe I need to play with that more often. Control shift, all that stuff, how you can paint just one wall. I really enjoyed this. I learned some stuff. I hope you learned some things too, and I'm going to put all the links in the description below. I'm going to put links to her channel, this video, and she does have a roofing tutorial series, and I'll put that in the links below. And I'm also going to put that cheat link for the Sims 4 official cheats in the description below for you as well. I highly recommend that you go watch this video for yourself, because it is wonderful. Lilsimsie is wonderful. Go subscribe to her channel. And, yeah. Boy, I look really pale with this lipstick on, but then I am really pale. Thank you for watching. Bye.